All right, good rainy morning to you. This actually finally feels like a day where it's okay to be spending some time inside. So I'm excited to be here with a really, really smart dude. I'm going to introduce you guys to Greg Elliott. You want to say hello?
Hi, everybody. I'm excited to do this with you, Logan.
Awesome. So Greg is a guy that I've been chatting with a little bit over the last little bit. And I'm going to give you a few notes about his background because this guy's coming in hot with an awful lot of credibility. So I want to make sure I don't miss any. He was nice enough to send me some notes. So in terms of Greg's background, he's a kinesiologist, a clinical exercise physiologist, and has his master's of science in exercise science. He went to Bloomburg University in Pennsylvania. We had a good chat about American varsity athletics when we sat down for coffee the first time. So that's cool. He's not satisfied with that. He's in his final year to become an osteopathic practitioner, which is awesome. And then he's got his own company and does online training and stuff through GTech Health and Performance. And then works downtown as part of the Fit to Train Human Performance Systems in downtown Vancouver. So all that stuff is awesome. We had to find something particular to talk about, or else we would have been able to go on for hours. What I wanted to bring him on to talk about is HRV, or heart rate variability. So he's the co-founder of hrvcourse.com, which is currently the leading online resource for learning the science and application of heart rate variability. And so with all the stress flying around these days, I figured this would be a perfect time to dive into this conversation. So good morning, Greg. Thanks for joining us. Anything I missed or anything you want to flesh out in terms of that awesome introduction I was able to give for you? What do we need to know?
No, that was beyond perfect.
Excellent. Well, thank you for providing me some notes. I wouldn't have been able to remember all that. That's super cool. So yeah, I'm actually really excited about this one because, we talked when we sat down the first time about, basically wanting to get the best results we can for people. And, I remember being a younger trainer and learning all the things like calories in and calories out and how many calories burpees burn and that kind of stuff. And I thought like I'd hit on the magic formula. And yet there was still challenges. There was still stuff about being a messy, emotional human being that was getting in the way of like the perfect science that I thought was going to be delivering great results. So talk to me a little bit about like, what is HRV and how did you even get into it?
Yeah, no, that was everyone when they graduate school thinks they have everything. They think that they've solved it all, right? And it's one of those things where when you start to get into the world of the various professions, you start to realize, when you think you have an answer, it opens so many more doors, right? There's so many more questions, and that answer leads to many more questions, right? So how I got into HRV, I was first introduced to it during my master's thesis. So my master's thesis was on non-invasive ways of measuring heart function, and particularly looking at with exercise in the clinical type populations. Like how can we validate it for people that are suffering from various heart issues? So at the time when I read it, heart rate variability was a great measure of heart function, but not during exercise. So as I didn't include it into my thesis from there, but obviously that's when I first learned and kind of took note of it. When I graduated in 2013 and came back home and started to look at what people were doing here in regards to more exercise physiology side of things, I started realizing that in the real world, heart rate variability has a much broader application than just heart function, right? So I saw a couple of people who were measuring and monitoring it, and I got very curious as to what it was. It seemed to be cutting edge on more the application side of things, and it was way more applicable than other measures of certain issues. So to play around with it a little bit, I got introduced to Bioforce, which was at the time run by a gentleman by the name of Joel Jameson at the Spokane, Washington down there. He's still there, strength conditioning coach that used it with MMA athletes. We had a great conversation with him, and he said, the best way to learn it is just do it. So he sent me some devices. I put it on at the time, the company I was with. I put it on a couple of our teammates, and we started monitoring just to see what was going on as I was educating myself. And the eye-opening thing for me that came with learning about heart rate variability is, starting to read and started to try to interpret with people. And I had a teammate that, came in one morning, and her HRV, she was a very high level athlete, very good heart rate variability overall. And her score crashed. It was really, really bad, right? And she goes, well, nothing's different. I didn't eat differently. I didn't, work out differently. Nothing was really different in regards to this. So, think about heart rate, I don't know why this has changed so much. At the point, I'm like, I have no idea. As the day started going on, she started to get symptoms of sickness. She started to get coughing and sneezing and all that type of stuff. And actually by noon, she had to cancel the rest of her day and go home because she was so sick. And I go, well, that's odd. This kind of predicted her being sick more than anything else. And as I started to dive into what heart rate variability actually is, I start to encompass of it's not just heart function or how well you perform. It's an overall measure of your autonomic nervous system, right? So it's all the processes that we don't consciously control. Our HRV will let us know what's going on, right? So as Joel said it best when I was reading his book is how our internal environment is processing our external environment, what this external factors are coming in, and how is our internal environment looking into it. So to me, HRV is the most powerful single biomarker that we can measure, right? And not only that, it's non-invasive, it's quick, a few minutes a day. You can do it on a day-to-day basis. You can do it from the comfort of your home. It's scientifically valid. So that's kind of what get me into HRV and what it is. So I'll kind of screen share, kind of give an understanding of the differences, because a lot of people, when they look at HRV or hear about HRV, they think it's heart rate when it's not. So I'll share here, if we can see that picture there.
Yes.
Good. Okay. So heart rate variability is different than heart rate. So heart rate is 60 beats per minute or 90 beats per minute and anything in that sense. What we're trying to get at with heart rate variability is it's the beat to beat intervals that we calculate, right? And it's not like a metronome. Your heart rate doesn't beat the same every single time, whether at rest or exercise or whatever it may be. It's not consistent. So the amount of variability that we have, you actually want to have a beat that's inconsistent. You don't want a consistent heart rate at rest, which is counterintuitive to a lot of people that are thinking. You think of like, oh no, if it's consistent, it's good. Where science shows that it's actually the complete opposite. So what this is representative of is the fact that we have a flexible and adaptable system. Okay, so research shows that increase in heart rate variability, people that have that are typically more active, are healthier when it comes to any kind of chronic issues. They live longer and live healthier lives. So just to give you a visual representation of this is what kind of looks like, and you want to see that type of spread in between your heart rate. You don't want something in regards to milliseconds that looks at, say the first, the 754, 0.754 seconds. You don't want to see that happen every single time. That's not a positive adaptation. That means your body's in a stressed situation. And when you talk about the autonomic nervous system, people that have a heart rate variability that's metronome-like, you are more sympathetically dominant, or you're more in that fight or flight state, right? Where if you're more variable like this, you're more in the parasympathetic or rest and digest, and you're ready to adapt and bring on new challenges. So in a general sense, that's kind of what HRV is. And there's many different applications that you can use this within a personal training or a clinical setting.
I love it. So I actually started, wearing the device that you sent me, and I was looking at what was happening. I had a similar experience with my HRV dropping, and then I got sick. So it was really interesting to see. And one of you did a great job of explaining the science. One of the things that kind of stuck in my head as I was trying to explain to people, like why do we want a variable heart rate? Why do we want those R-to-R intervals to be so different? In my head, what I thought of is like, well, if it's like this metronome quality, kind of same distance, it's kind of like a marching army. And so in my head, I was like, well, it's not like very fun. There's a lot of stress involved in that. And then the opposite would be like, if you're out at the playground and you see a bunch of kids just running around, they're falling down, they're jumping all over the place. There's a ton of variability in their movement. Well, that looks pretty carefree and fun. And so that's what I picture in my head when I think about variability. I want to have that young, happy, carefree, hop, skip, and a jump kind of heart, instead of like this goose stepping, stressed out, really strict heartbeat. So I shared that with a couple of clients, and they laughed because the picture was a little bit easier to pick up on, in the sense of wanting that lighthearted kind of stress response, right?
Yeah, totally. And that's and that's a good analogy, even when you talk about movement stuff, right? Imagine if you do a movement, you only do it one way, right? And that's the only way that you do it. What happens if an instance that requires you to do it in a different way? Right? So you don't have the adaptability of a body to be able to do something. And that's where strains, sprains, and different things necessarily happen, because your body hasn't experienced that position or that area before, right? So there's obviously a huge debate in regards to what's proper form, what's improper form, what's proper movement, what's improper movement, and it's because of this, right? There are ways that are more advantageous when it comes to levers and physics to be able to lift a weight, but then there's the reality of life, right? It's the science and art of things. You have to be able to combine both, and heart rate variability, to a sense, is that exact same thing.
Yeah, I love it. So, so wearables have been more and more popular recently. We've had the Fitbits, and we've had the step counters, and we've had all that kind of stuff. And there can definitely be some benefit to those types of things, just because it's helping people become aware of physical activity or heart rate or whatever. And something that monitors HRV can still give you all that information. But what's different is that it's wearable technology that's giving you this R to R interval difference. So it's this whole extra level of data, which, someone like you, when you know how to use it, it allows you to make some different recommendations or see things coming or whatever. So can you explain a little bit about how stress would affect the body, or how it would affect training? Like why or how are you going to use HRV with an athlete or with a client in order to make some changes? What might that look like?
Yeah, totally. And when you talk about various wearables, like it's not, it's not, you only have to measure HRV, and it's great, steps counted and calories burned are all great information. And what HRV provides you is what type of impact is that change created, right? So when you talk about steps, say your client, say you have a device and they're measuring HRV, like a wearable device, and it says HRV is a certain value. We'll just throw out a number that it's 30. Obviously, higher heart rate variability is better adaptation in a general sense. And they're doing 3,000 steps a day. Okay. And you go, okay, well, we know that science shows anywhere from, minimum of 8 up to 10, around 10,000 steps a day is advantageous for you for a better, healthier life. Okay, perfect. Great. How much of a change does this person create when they go to 10,000 steps a day? Is it too much, too fast? Is it too little for them? Is it actually making a meaningful change to their body and their health, right? And this is where HRV in a clinical setting has actually helped me significantly, because, you can subjectively think that there's an important factor in someone's health and wellness, right? And we all have our lenses. As personal trainers, as psychologists, as medical doctors, we have our lens. Nutritionists, we have our lens of what people need to do in order to be healthy, and that's the lens that we have. And I like to make sure that I'm accountable to making sure people that are healthy, right? So if I say, okay, you move better and do these various things in my clinical practice, treating people, I want to see how much of an impact I actually have, right? You can move better and all that type of stuff, but is that the limiting factor for their health and wellness? I don't know that, right? And the only way to determine that is through an objective measure, which I use heart rate variability. Do these people actually need more psychological counseling? Do they need to be able to do journaling or breath work? Do they have to be able to actually change their nutrition or improve their sleep quality? Or is there an underlying medical condition they haven't seen their doctor for the last 10 years in order to make sure that they're monitoring appropriately, right? So this is a huge thing. And I think, I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but I think this is an opportunity right now that we have as professionals at this specific moment to expand our network and connect with people that are outside of our realm, right? Connect with naturopaths, connect with doctors, connect with, physiotherapists, massage therapists, and kind of get these people of how they can help you and your clients. And I always tell people, when people come and see me, it'd be very rare that I'm the only person that they see on our team or somebody else, because I only can help in a certain way, right? I don't want to be a generalist where I think I know everything. I want to be good at what I know. There's a few things that I know. There's a lot of things that I don't. And I want to make sure that I have the tool set in my back pocket of other people that can help me along these things. So that's a big thing. So when we talk about, how does stress affect the body, we'll kind of go back to the side of the science stuff. So again, I'll share my screen here. of one of the things that we run in HRV course. We have in every single module, we actually have a summary of what that module is in literally a sheet, right? So every single module has a sheet of a summary of the videos that we go through. So this is actually one of the sheets. So this is, we'll go through here, make it bigger. That's not how you make it bigger. Good. So this is one of the worksheets that we have for HRV course. So it talks about, general stress and the stress, how we go through it, right? So we talk about the history of how it came about, what it means, and where people go. And the term stress, which we'll get into in a little bit here, originally came from the endocrinologist Hans Selye, who's actually, I think he's an Austrian and Canadian or something like that. But he has some Canadian in him. That actually coined the term stress back in the early 1900s. So, so you look at stress in a sense is that you see homeostasis there in the blue in the left side, right? So when a stressor occurs, whatever necessarily is, we go through the alarm stage, right? Again, this is very the basic stuff. It gets more complicated, but we kind of summarize what we possibly can. This is where we introduce some sort of stressor, whether it's an exercise or a change of diet, or what we're going through now in regards to the financial pressures of life. It's a stressor, right? And so it's the alarm stage, and then you get the resistance. This is where your body starts to fight back to be able to go back to normal, right? And this is typically what happens. And you get to see from HRV, you get to see necessarily how big of a response each intervention is, right? So this is why I like it, is you can kind of guess based on various formulas what's the internal external load of what's going on, right? Primarily in our profession, we deal with external load, how much weight was given, how many sets, how many reps, and we can kind of give some various calculations as to what's going on to give us some information about how much adaptation that we perceive to be able to happen. But to me, I want to know specifics. So you start to see the resistance stage, and the peak of that curve depends on the person. It depends on what their state currently is. And then from there, there's one of two things that happen. Either people recover from that stress, or the stress, well, three things. Either recover from the stress maintains and stays, or you get to a point when it stays, you get into the exhaustion stage, right? Where it's overload, right? Decomposition, your body shuts down. In an athlete realm, we call this overtraining syndrome, right? This is where people get into the overtraining stage of things, right? You feel fatigued, you have no energy, all that type of stuff, hard to concentrate, all that. So this is the general sense of what's going on. So, and if you look at the bottom there, you get individual stress response. So stress, I'll kind of read it out. Stress response is dependent on an individual's physical, emotional, mental, and experimental state, and therefore a stress response to the same stressor can express differently among individuals, right? So I like to say this specific point where this is the general stress response, and it doesn't matter what stress comes in, right? This is how our body reacts. Now, there's the general stress, then there's the individual stress. Just because people are going through various financial or emotional time frame doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to run faster, right? There's specific adaptations to changes that need to happen, right? However, the reaction of our body, what happens in a general sense is this. However, what changes occur as a resistance, right? In the resistance stage, there's different mechanisms that bring our body back to normal into a homeostasis, which is called our allostatic mediators. All these mediators, depending on what the stress is what causes the adaptation for various things. So that's kind of in a general sense. Stop sharing the screen there. How our body kind of, again, adapts to various stress. And I'll kind of go into the next point that we're going to cover here is there's a big theory going on right now, which I completely agree, is it's a saying that you can't overtrain, but you can under recover, right? So when most people hear that, they kind of think, oh, that's weird, but it's very true. People kind of have high training loads or high amounts of stress, but if you provide the adequate amount of adaptation, change and recovery, then you should be able to recover from that stressor. And I always, one of the best examples that I do when I talk to various people is I love the exercise of going through good and bad stress, right? So I like to highlight on the board, okay, what's a good stress, right? And depending on the people that you talk to, various things, whether it's exercise, whether it's adequate diet. When you talk about the emotional side of things, you think things of like public speaking, right? Because it's like you get nervous to do it. At the end, you feel great. You get a little more confidence, right? So it's a positive change, right? And then you go through what's bad stressors. You talk about, divorces or alcohol, or people have these in their mind of what's a good and bad stress. So I always say it's like, absolutely, right? Science shows that these are good stressors and these are bad stressors. I wouldn't agree more. However, if I completely reverse those wordings, where if I erase the good and put bad and erase the bad and put good, science shows the exact same thing, right? When you took a literature, right? And the one example, and I'll screen share kind of from a stress standpoint. I know I'm going from tangents here, but this is, I love this stuff. So a PowerPoint slide here. So Hans Selye, the founder, said of stress, it's not stress that kills us, it's our body's reaction to it, right? So what does that mean? Why is, why can alcohol be a positive stress and exercise be a negative stress, right? So what are these things that we're going through? So the study that I show kind of to emphasize my point is the fact in 1980, there was a study done by the U.S. Department of Energy. And what they wanted to be able to show was the fact that work exposure to a stressor of some sort will show negative adaptations to health, right? So what they did is they found, they took the data from almost 71,000 nuclear shipyard workers. So these people were exposed to radiation on a daily basis, okay? They had almost 30,000 that were exposed to, so that measurement is approximately 2 to 3 x-rays per year in regards to amount of exposure. They took over 10,000, they're exposed to about 1 x-ray per year, and the 32,000 that were not exposed to any x-rays, okay? From 1957 to 1981, they collected information, right, over that time frame. And what they looked at are people that were diagnosed or had cancers, diseases of the circulatory system, respiratory system, digestive symptoms, nervous system, infectious diseases, mental illnesses, and any external cause that causes issues to their health, okay? So what they wanted to show essentially is the fact that people that were exposed to radiation, they would get something and it would be worse, right? So they want to show that they have to be able to control these various things. Now, what they found was that the highest exposed group to radiation actually had a 24% reduction in all-cause mortality, meaning they lived on average about 3 years longer than the people that were not exposed to any radiation, right? The two claims that they said is that the high-dose workers demonstrated significantly lower circulatory, respiratory, and all-cause mortality than did the unexposed workers. And then in addition, the cohort had a lower rates for the most radiation-sensitive cancers like leukemia and the hemolytic cancers than the controls. So what does that mean? The amount of stress that were accumulated by these people, they were able to recover from. And it kind of, I like to use the analogy of the Princess Bride. I know I'm kind of dating myself a little bit from this one, right? Where when you talk about the poison, the person took the poison small time overall over the time and became accustomed to be able to have that poison. So the cups, both of them had poison hues, and you find no matter which one it was, right? And the other person obviously died. But it's very similar, that kind of small exposure to a while, your body kind of gets that, okay, I get this stressor, very similar to exercise when you think about it, right? When you talk about strength training, like you add a little bit and add a little bit more in strength and all that type of stuff, you can kind of build the progressive adaptation that you necessarily need to be able to show results, right? So to me, it's not the stress that kills us, it's our body's reaction to it. So that kind of gives a small insight, obviously, into how our body and training should be adapted to stress.
That's awesome. I love it. So I think where I was excited to have you come and have this conversation is if we just kind of spin it back to, most of the people watching this are probably going to be fitness nuts or personal trainers or something like that. If you think about somebody that wants to lose weight and they're going to come to the gym and you're going to, increase their activity, you're going to put them through workouts, you're probably going to look at their nutrition, you're thinking about all these things that are supposed to essentially like burn energy, right? So they're going to eat a little bit less, they're going to work out a little bit more, and we want that to result in fat loss. the thing that's so interesting about HRV is where we sort of look at good stress, bad stress, and what's the state of the external world and how is that being processed by the internal world. You work as a trainer for, I don't know, probably not even that long, and you do everything right for a client in terms of weight loss, but they don't lose weight. And so then like, I think our natural inclination is like, well, you're lying about what you're eating. Like, you're not logging your food properly. You're not writing down how much cheese you're eating, or you're not logging the wine that you're drinking. Like, that's our automatic fallback, is like, well, the data has to be wrong. It's just that we don't have enough data. So if we looked at that same person and they're doing the exercise and they're doing the nutrition, but they're super busy, they're not getting good quality sleep, they're not getting enough sleep, they're actually just not recovering from the intensity of the workouts that we're putting them through, well, then that external environment acting on that internal body, it's ultimately the internal body that's deciding to give up fat. And so if that's not in balance, if that's not in a good spot, then the body's not gonna do that, right? So when you actually look at incorporating this tool into helping somebody, what kinds of changes or what kinds of recommendations have you made, sort of seeing this kind of like, oops, what we thought was supposed to happen wouldn't happen? What are some of the other strategies that you end up using that we might not think link right away to fat loss, but end up getting them there?
Yeah, I would say in the clinical setting, when it comes with pain, or when it comes to training for people that have specific goals when it comes to body composition, I don't think people realize how big of an emotional factor there is regarding to the achievement of goals. Right? There's the physical side of things when you talk about exercise and nutrition, water and supplements and all that type of stuff to be able to optimize goals. But people don't realize that the mental stress, right? So of what's going on from the back end of things. I think that is a big barrier. And this is when I talk about, we have our lenses, right? We have our lenses, growing up in the sports realm and the exercise science realm, it revolves around, nutrition, and I mean, back when I graduated, nutrition and exercise. Now people are starting into the whole sleep factor, start to understand about sleep, and it starts to open up a little bit more of that. But I don't think we've adequately addressed the emotional state of people, especially the world that we live in now, how it's drastically changed, and the amount of avenues to add additional stress to our body, right? When you talk about, now we have world news at our fingertips, where before we had to wait for the morning paper. We now have to worry about body imaging issues, right? And making sure that we show that we're happy on social media, or all these different things. And having a young child he's now 18 months and things like that, and getting away from the idea that I have to post certain things or provide information, and kind of a little more of like, I don't necessarily want my child's picture on everything like that. So kind of distancing myself away from social media, to realize that getting out of that realm of this constantly bombardment of stuff, like, to a point of like, even add the stressor of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that person on The Bachelor did this and that, and sports teams of, my team lost, and just to see people about that. And there's so many more avenues of this emotional side of things that we add to our body that get us into that sympathetic, that inflammatory type state, and don't adequately recover. So it makes it very harder for our body to want to accept change and accept adaptation, right? So, and this is what's been fantastic with heart rate variability, is that, to me, it's like, now I can measure that for you. And people think, oh, isn't resting heart rate good enough? To a sense, and it can be as a starting point. But if you give me 10 different people that have the same resting heart rate, you will have 10 different heart rate variability values, right? Because sometimes you may not know as in depth in regards to someone's on a specific low dose of a beta blocker medication that decreases their heart rate down, because they're whether doctors want them to take it for many different reasons, is that person's actually in a stress state, but they have a very low resting heart rate value. So this gives a little more insight into the realm of how stress is affecting this person, rather than just that heart rate. It's a little more sensitive. And then from there, this is where I said this is a perfect time for us to say, okay, you've done the traditional route, you've talked to them about sleep, you've tried to optimize that, you've done your nutrition education, you've done your exercise component, they're doing everything, and things aren't achieving their goals. You need to reach out to your community and try to get some help, right? Wherever you think that it is. If it is, you think there's an emotional issue where the person is going through divorce and they're always worried about finances and this and that, and they have a bunch of kids and however it may be in regards to the pressures of that, they have to be able to work on that too, just like they're working on their exercise and work on their nutrition. Like you just can't ignore it or think people are good enough to deal with it. So you have to, it comes down to 5 areas, right, of health for me, right? And you got to make sure that you address all of them at all times. One is physical health, making sure that they're physically healthy, right? There's if they have some sort of diabetes or hypertension that is being properly managed, whether medically or non-medically. 2 is the amount of physical activity you do, that has to be addressed. 3, your nutrition. What are you on that? Are you working on that? What's going on from there? Number 4 is your sleep and recovery. What are you doing to adequately recover from the day? I don't care if it's cryotherapy. I don't care if it's sleep. I don't care if it's journaling. I don't care if it's whatever. You have to do something for allow your body to recover, to wind down, to get into that parasympathetic action. And 5 is your mental and emotional well-being, right? So if you aren't addressing at least all of those 5 things, you have to be able to, the biggest thing is they're not achieving their goals. You have to be able to address each of those. So you got to figure out which one do we need to work on the most. It may be in your tool set and maybe not. But if you aren't achieving your goals, you have to be able to cover the basics of those 5. Because all of those are going to have a factor in regards to body composition, in regards to health, wellness, performance, and everything.
So I think it, from 2 angles, I think there's been this real shift in the fitness industry. We're still a really young industry, which is great. But there's, I've been in it for 20 years, and even in 20 years, the amount of times that I've seen these major, like, oh my God, I feel like I should refund my first 5 years worth of clients. The number of times that that's happened has been really interesting. So there's 2 things that kind of stick out for me based on what you just said. When it comes to sort of being able to deal with those 5 and whether or not it's part of your skill set or not. I'm thinking about our success story winner from this last year. And her story, her success was ultimately losing 108 pounds and dropping 20% body fat. And, by the numbers, that sounds like a really obvious success. But what was interesting for me was she'd done lots of different diets, and she did the juice thing, and she did the order the meals and this and that, whatever. And so she hadn't been successful. And yet those are still all by the numbers too, right? If you give up control of your nutrition and you eat what gets delivered to your doorstep, you think that would help you get the result. Or if you manage caloric deficit by meal replacement, like maybe it's not a long-term strategy, but in the short term, it should help you with weight loss. So, if you look at why by the numbers didn't work before and then why it worked this time, one of the things that I was able to share a little bit about at that event was like the 5 finalists that were sitting at the front of that room, they all had incredible relationships with their trainers. There was a friendship aspect. There was even a family aspect. There was a lot of care. There was, you could tell that that both the client and the trainer was getting a lot of deeply meaningful emotional support or some really good quality relationship from the work that they were doing. So, maybe you can't predict whether your emotional support for your client is going to be the thing that turns the dial for them, but it very well could be. And so it would be funny to go, well, what's changed is they've started exercising and I'm helping them with their diet. So, their physical exercise and their nutrition, good. Those were the 2 linchpins and we took care of that. Maybe you made the gym a fun place to be. Maybe all of a sudden you took the stress and the intimidation and the fear factor out of that space. And that was actually the linchpin, because trying to do it before on their own would have been scary and embarrassing and hard and stressful, right? So it's interesting because all 5 of these are probably going to intersect in some really important ways. And yet again, like, how do I know if the thing that I'm doing is giving me the result that I want? Well, HRV is going to provide that measurement, right?
No, absolutely.
So then you've obviously been using this for a while. It's been a part of your clinical practice all the way back to university. If some of the people watching this are interested and they're thinking, hey, this sounds really cool, I want to learn more about it. How do you start? What's available? Obviously, you have to know a lot to be able to make really specific, awesome recommendations. But if this is something that kind of sounds worth maybe working into the toolbox, what do you recommend?
Yeah, so there's two different ways to be able to go start in regards to devices. The first one, majority of people will have a heart rate strap, hopefully one that can kind of pair with your phone. The good way to start is doing daily measurements, right? So you do your morning readiness readings, and that's what the company that I work with closely, with Jason and the team at Elliott HRV. They have a free app that you can use. You can start looking at that and start looking at your heart rate variability and start to compare it. If you really want to get into the biohacking side of things and want to know a lot more than just that and start to look at numbers and how they compare, I couldn't recommend higher BioStrap in regards to the cost and the scientific validity of their device. They're a great company, great interface, and they really get to show a bunch of information that shows, and you start to look at a big community of people and start to compare and contrast those values. So those are the two I would say I'd recommend a lot. And then obviously for the educational piece, we have a lot of free content on the Foundations of HRV course at hrvcourse.com if you guys are interested in the continuing education side of things. So there's a lot of blogs you get from there. You get to get into that. If you do purchase the course at any point, you get access to we typically do about every 3 to 4 months. We do a webinar, a live Q&A for people to ask questions. To know everything from that, we usually get a few hundred people that attend those from there. So it's quite it's quite a good community of people. So those are what I would start with to be able to recommend. You can do for free to start, again, from Elliott HRV. If you got a heart rate strap, a little more biohacking, I wouldn't recommend higher the BioStrap from there. And then get into, if you want to know about the science and the applications, hrvcourse.com. And we're coming out with a lot of kind of even mini courses from there. I do a deep dive to some of the physiology of HRV. It's pretty boring, but I try to show the complexity of this marker. And there's ones of HRV and sleep and team sports and all that type of stuff. So we're trying to provide as much education out there as possible.
So just to make sure that I have it right, you really can't do anything about HRV without a device. So the
Yes.
kind of first step is you've got to get something that measures HRV. And I think there's a couple of rings out there, and there's a couple of some various tools that do that. I did the Foundations of HRV course a little while ago. It was awesome. It was super high level science, but surprisingly broken down in chunks that I felt like I was able to handle. So that was really cool. And you talk a little bit in the course about some of the different devices. There's devices that say they measure HRV and they don't really. Nope. So it's probably worth making sure that you actually get one that does what it says it's doing. So whether it's a morning readiness, there's a little finger thing I think I got from Elliott HRV where you just put your finger in the little sensor and it measures your morning readiness, or whether you get something that's tracking sort of 24/7, like some of the rings or wearables. That might be a great place to start. A lot of those apps are already going to show you information that allows you to start looking at what your response is. So that'd be a cool place to start. I went in that way first without really knowing anything. And I just started to see my readiness was pretty good when I got 7 to 9 hours of sleep. And if I stayed up too late reading a book, then my HRV wasn't very good. So that was a good place to start. From the perspective of, education, especially for being a trainer, figuring out how to use HRV to apply, different recommendations to a training program. The Foundations of the HRV course was super helpful, and it applies to all devices because it applies to HRV as an entire overarching concept. So Greg was nice enough to give us some links, and I'll put those in the video notes and stuff so you guys can check that out. And again, it's just going to be a way to know for sure. We always say if you're not assessing, you're guessing. So this is going to be a way to know a lot more about what's happening and be able to make some more on target recommendations for people. So awesome stuff there. Anything else that we need to know? Anything else that you want to wrap up with, Greg?
No, yeah, one of the things, if you guys want to do the foundations course, there'll be a promo code and the links from there for you guys. And any questions at all, you can contact me at greg@hrvcourse.com. And now that we have downtime with everybody, like I said, the biggest thing is reach out to people and connect with people at this specific point. I've been doing that, and I try to do that on a daily basis now. Try to connect with people and people that I know that are in my network that I haven't talked to before. People have reached out to me to be able to kind of sit down for a virtual coffee date, to be able to talk shop. So the biggest thing is reach out to people, connect with people, make some meetings, make use of this time that we have now that the world is relatively on pause. So educate yourself, make connections, and make this this time, whatever it may be, the as benefit to you as possible.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah, that's exactly why, we took the time to do little things like this, and hopefully we're finding a way to help some people. So awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I totally just sat back and had a big grin on my face as you just went at it. I can totally tell that you're super passionate about this stuff, and it's really cool to see how you're using it at a really high level. So I'll make sure that I get all the links and resources and stuff that Greg mentioned into the video notes. And yeah, I would say, this is probably about a 4 to 5 hour course, if I remember correctly, in terms of being able to get that foundations done. So makes for a nice little day of learning. So there you go. So thanks so much, Greg. I hope you have a great day. It's a little rainy today, so maybe that means we can be productive and get some stuff done.
Yeah, that's the plan. I now have to go to the hospital to get my little guy some vaccinations. So I got to go be able to do that. But Logan, thank you very much for taking the time. I think this is great benefit for you and your team, and for all the trainers at Steve Nash there. So keep it up, keep it going. I think you're doing a fantastic job.
Awesome. Let's close it out on that. Thanks so much.
You bet.